All right, welcome to episode 2 of the 4th Gen 4Runner rebuild. I am Samuel. In today's episode, we are going to be going over the initial cost of bringing this 4Runner back on the road, what it would take if we wanted to start driving it as is right now, safety-wise, like bushings, that sort of thing. So I have a price list for that. We're going to go over that a little bit in the beginning of this episode, and then once we're done with that, we will go over kind of the initial build plans for this 4Runner. What do we want to do to this thing? We have a rough idea. We don't know 100% yet, but I would like to just document it here so that way you guys have an idea of what we want to do, kind of what our end goal may be, and hopefully maybe spark some ideas. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. To put it simply, I want to take care of some of the safety aspects of this, and I thought what better way to do that than putting together maybe some info for those of you out there who are curious after seeing the first episode with what this vehicle needs, like what would it take to just get it back on the road safely. And again, some of this is opinionated from me, but I do want to give you a little bit of insight on what would make this vehicle safe in my mind to actually go out and drive versus kind of how it's sitting right now. So let me grab the laptop and we'll pull up a list here. I went ahead and researched ahead of time what these parts may cost, what the situation with that may be, and kind of what we're looking at. So I am here. I have a Google Doc. I made it easy for myself. So first things first would be the control arms. So I had mentioned in episode 1, which by the way, if you have not seen episode 1, please go check it out. Link in the description or a top card over here. That episode features info about this 4Runner, the way we bought it, how it sits, as is, and a, GoPro camera inspection with me going over things, details, the frame, the overall condition. So go check that out. But anyway, control arms. What I'd like to do is mention the fact that the ball joints are an issue. I had mentioned it in the last video and I'll mention it here again. It is a safety thing for me. Why is it such a big deal? Well, the ball joint holds, part of that whole knuckle assembly in sync with the upper control arm. And when they shear, all sorts of bad things can happen. You can have a really, really catastrophic failure of a ball joint, which would send you into a massive accident if you're at highway speed or whatnot. It's not a good time. So that was one of the first things I thought about for this vehicle is like, if I wanted to get it back on the road and actually drive it and feel comfortable every day, I would want to get those ball joints changed. And so what it comes down to is the left and the right control arms would have to be replaced. Now, I am only going to present to you data from Toyota Parts Deal, the website today. That is OEM parts, and the reason I'm doing only OEM parts is maybe some of you who are watching can't actually go to, a independent shop for XYZ reason, or maybe you can do it at home but you don't have a press. The ball joints on this vehicle, Toyota says you have to buy the entire control arm for that. And those will run you $351.31 for the right side, and then the left side is $370. So pretty expensive. Yes, you can replace those ball joints separately if you have a press and you can press them out. MOOG, M-O-O-G, the brand who makes aftermarket replacement parts, does offer those ball joints. They can be done for much cheaper, but again, for OEM, you have to do the entire arm. And again, the reason I'm mentioning the OEM thing is because that's what a lot of shops will do is, they'll be like, okay, we have to get the OEM part, and then they see that's what's available and that's what has to be done. So hopefully this helps you kind of compare or have an understanding of the cost involved maybe. Again, these are just parts prices that you could probably expect to see at a shop or anything like that. No labor, no tax right now, none of the extra, stuff you'll have to pay for. So that's the control arm front. Why is these ball joints so important? Like I said earlier, it's a failure point. Tundras and Sequoias, the first generation of those two vehicles, were very susceptible to that in the early 2000s, and it was a big problem. So I would take it with a grain of salt that these are better. I would just replace it, even if they have the 211,000 miles like this has, and maybe they're still good. If you know they're good, you can run them. If not, that's an item, like even on here, if I knew they were good, I would still want to replace them because I don't know how it was driven and that sort of thing. I would feel a lot better and safer knowing that it's taken care of. Same goes for the upper ball joints from the upper control arms. So Toyota says the same thing. You got to replace the whole arm, and that is $277.92 a side. You need 2 arms. That puts you, well over $500 in just upper arms, and looping back to those lower control arms, well over $600, $700 in just arms. Granted, though, the upside of those arms is you do get new rubber bushings on the inside and whatnot, so you get to take care of that. When it comes to hardware and bolts for aligning these lower, control arms and stuff like that, alignment rather, I would buy all new hardware. I had said in the previous episode that these have corrosion on them and they looked a little crusty, and they do. They can freeze up, and the alignment shop can actually refuse to align your vehicle because they can't break those bolts loose, and that would have to be taken care of as a cost, as an expense. So you can get new camber bolt hardware. It's like $17 for the cam assembly, $22 for the sub assembly, $16, almost $17 for the nut, and you need the appropriate quantity, right? So probably 2 of everything per each side. And yeah, that'll add up to a good amount of money, but at the same time, non-frozen bolts means you can work with it a lot easier, change it, you can maybe grease them a little bit when you throw them in, that sort of thing. You'd be a little bit better off, and just avoiding frozen bolts that you have to cut off. So personally, on this vehicle, I would see if I could save them first. If not, if they're just a little too corroded or the threads aren't as good as I was hoping, I would just simply change them out, and it's not super expensive to do so, like the whole control arm, for example. This is a much cheaper thing to take care of, especially if you're going to align your vehicle a lot, or you need, you live where roads are bumpy and you need that alignment checked more often. Take care of those alignment bolts. Tie rods, pretty self-explanatory. The boots were torn in the last episode. I kind of showed that a little bit, or leaking grease. Should be replaced. It's one of those things where if it fails, that wheel is just going to wander about in the wheel well, and again be something of a catastrophic failure when it goes. So it's dangerous. You want both wheels to steer well, no play, that sort of thing. So I would take care of those personally, even though they seem all right. $55 a side, you pay $110, before tax, give or take. It's not so bad, and they're not hard to change out. You can change them out yourself, go get an alignment, and be good to go in that front. Wheel bearings about $180 for the right side and $165 for the left. You can do it cheaper, but again, those are OEM parts. If the wheels aren't spinning and the vehicle isn't coasting well, then you should consider doing your wheel bearings. And especially, like I said earlier, this has 211,000 miles. It's probably time, especially in the front. The rear you can do. I think you can get away with running those longer. In my opinion, you're not dealing with steering and whatnot. Other rotational forces are kind of dead straight on. So take that for what you will. But personally, it wouldn't affect me to not change the rear, but to daily this vehicle. I would be more concerned about the front. It does need some power steering fluid. That's cheap. You can go to the store, pick up some. A lot of Toyotas use ATF for power steering fluid. It's just not dyed. So, whatever the cost is for that per bottle, it's nothing crazy. That's a simple thing. It was low, fill it up, take care of that. One last thing before we dig into a big cost item would be tires. Tires are expensive. These tires had a date code of 2017 on them, and the spare was original with some nice sidewall cracking with dry rot. Not so great. Wouldn't want to drive on those. It's a safety thing for me. Old rubber is not good. You could have a blowout. You're susceptible to a lot more things to happen with old rubber, even if the tread's good. So please don't be that person and run an old tire that has an old date code and signs of it shouldn't be on the road sort of thing. Yeah, so I went ahead and went on Tire Rack and looked at 265/70/18 because that's what this vehicle came with to us, and the stock size is 265/60. So again, there might be a slight difference in price, but if I were to replace it for exactly what's on there, I went on Tire Rack and looked for that same size, 265/70/18, and I chose the Falcon Wild Peak. You can choose a really good tire. I have experience driving on the Falcon Wild Peaks, and it would be a great match for this vehicle, in my opinion, after running them on the Sequoia, and couldn't be happier. So to give you a rough cost range, I kind of went with a good all-terrain tire that was snow rated and whatnot. Matches the vehicle well. The wild peaks here as of this time, today is October 29th, 2024. You can get the Falcon Wild Peak AT3Ws for $243 and 84 cents a tire. That is a total of about $975 before tax. That's a closeout deal. Or you can get the AT4Ws $281 a tire. So again, expect to spend around $900 to $1,200 on tires. That's without tax, without install, without wheel balancing, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the cost you would expect for a good set of tires. Again, don't go cheap. It's not worth it to get maybe some off-brand tires. I know a lot of people were like, oh, it can get by, or just, rubber, it's what's touching the road. That's the only thing between you and the road in a vehicle are the tires, and that makes a massive difference on grip, especially if you're traveling through all sorts of terrain like this vehicle is built for. So do yourself a favor, grab a good set of tires. I wouldn't want to drive on these dry rotted hand cooks personally. Even in town, just seeing the way they're cracked and stuff, not my thing. I'd rather just swap them out and move on. So yeah, that kind of wraps it up for the base of the vehicle, kind of bringing it up to speed to drive mechanically and be happy with. Of course, there's other things like a clean interior and that sort of thing, that would need to be taken care of. That's very opinionated, so I'm kind of leaving those costs out. Whether you can tolerate maybe a slightly dirtier inside vehicle or you can clean it yourself, that sort of thing. So I feel like I don't need to include that kind of cost metric. That's as you wish to do with, just kind of covering the mechanicals here. So really, there's nothing else that this needs. There's a headlight relay or two. The relays will cost a various amounts. It won't be maybe too expensive to figure out some of the electrical issues, but I don't think the electrical is so severe where I couldn't daily drive this and worry about a bulb going out or anything like that. It would be solved over time. So just to make it drive, those are the things I went over: tie rods, wheel bearings, control arm, the bushings, sort of, ball joints. That would make me happy. Of course, you can always take care of the rear. The rear could use new bushings in places and that sort of thing, but to make it just comfortable to drive and for me to feel confident in it, those are the things I would change. The last thing that is the most expensive and arguably probably the most important repair from a vehicle longevity standpoint would be the sunroof. So in episode 1, I revealed that the sunroof had been tilted back for quite some time. There was debris lodged and we didn't know what it is. So stay tuned for more on that. Actually, I'll give you a little inside preview of episode 3 at the end of this video. I'll give you a hint now. We tore everything out to deal with that sunroof, and you're going to be very surprised possibly to hear how much dislike and distaste I have for a sunroof after experiencing it. I never liked them before, but this is even extra. So because the sunroof was tilted back, debris gets lodged in there, and sunroofs are expensive to repair. Not only that, if you want to drive this vehicle in the snow or the rain, it's going to leak in. If you have a leak anywhere, then the headliner is going to get damaged. If the headliner gets all soggy and stuff, there's electrical next to it that's going to be affected. So it's just a chain link thing. Now the costs. I'm actually going to go back here because I'm multiple pages deep in Toyota parts deals on the laptop, and I want to read off some of these costs for you because they're just insane. So for those of you who love sunroofs, please keep up your maintenance. Whether that's oiling the tracks or using it a few times a year, cleaning the seal, stay on it because it's expensive. And how expensive are we talking? The headliner itself retails here at almost $1,500 before shipping. So $1,500 is not a small amount for, a fabric covered headliner. And what can I say? $1,500. That's a lot of money for, you could have a nice front bumper for the cost of that, and stuff. Like, you can have good mods to not deal with that. And that is just a headliner. Now, if we go deeper and say maybe your tracks, in our case, our tracks were jammed, and it were jammed with a ton of debris. It was really, really bad. Again, wait for the next episode. You'll want to see this. The tracks themselves, $900. But if it makes you feel a little bit better, there's one for $887. So there you go. Save yourself a couple bucks. there. The glass itself, say maybe the glass got destroyed or like cracked by like a pine cone out in the forest or hail or something. The glass itself, $757. It's expensive. Now you'll think, okay, maybe I need to replace only this one thing. It's maybe not so bad. But let me put it to you this way. The cost of the sunroof parts probably are maybe 3 times more than the sunroof option was to have installed when the vehicle was new. That's how expensive the sunroof is. And not only that, if you want to deal with repairing the sunroof, the amount of hours of labor you'll have to do to take everything out, like the whole interior really realistically has to come down, the headliner, all these pieces, it is a lot of work to do it properly. You'll go to the dealer and you could easily spend $3,000 dealing with a headliner, being soggy, need to be replaced from the sunroof leaking, or the glass broken. It's very, very expensive. So with the sunroof being the most expensive part of this ordeal, if you have that failure, please, whatever you do, get it fixed correctly. I know it costs a lot of money. Don't just seal it up. You're gonna risk having issues later down the line. Take care of it properly. And if you wanna see the whole process on removing that all, man, it was long, but check out episode 3. I'll get that out at some point soon and start putting that together. If it's already out, check the description for episode 3. We go over the interior, how you remove the pieces and that sort of thing, and show what real damage the sunroof can do and what you got to take apart to get to all that, because it's not a simple task. It can be done at home, but it'll very quickly, that whole episode will show you why the labor cost is so high for any shop to look at that. So I'll reveal more about what we're going to deal with the sunroof issue and how we're going to approach that in those next episodes, but just know it's a very expensive thing, and if you want to fix it, stay tuned. It's a lot of work. So anyway, that is what it would take to make this 4Runner drivable. There's quite a cost associated with it, and I think a lot of people don't cover the real kind of issues of when you pick up somebody else's vehicle, or a vehicle that's been used or half built. Nobody really covers kind of that side of it, what it would take just to get it on the road again so you could use it and feel comfortable and safe and that sort of thing. So I thought it might be a cool way to share that info with you, and not a lot of people do that. They're kind of just, oh yeah, we just slapped new parts on it, versus this is kind of what it would take to put it into a drivable state before X amount of mods or that sort. So hopefully you appreciate that info. I really enjoyed looking it up, I'll be honest, to give me some insight on what things would cost if I wasn't going an aftermarket route for something else, or didn't have the skills or ability. So it will cost quite a bit. So let's get into the build details for this 4Runner. What do we want to do? What is our initial outlook of how we want to put this thing together? We want to keep it simple. We already have an 80 series Land Cruiser. That thing is an absolute tank, a beast, a monster, whatever you want to call it. That's going to do far more than this 4Runner is capable of, without thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in mods in order to get there. It's just a different vehicle, end of story. We don't want it to be an 80 series competitor. It's not that. At the end of the day, it's an independent front suspension versus solid axle. And for those of you who don't have any experience with solid axle, a lot less things can break, and it can take a lot more punishment. IFS or independent front suspension just cannot. So as our first kind of IFS build, I really don't want to put 35s on this. I mean, I've consulted between my dad and my brothers, anyone who's been kind of a part of this build, and like, what do we want to do? And everybody at the beginning, yeah, we can fit 35s on it, blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of did some poking on the forums, and it's like, oh, okay, body mount shop, not so bad. Oh, like now we got to cut into the fender well? I don't want to do that. I don't feel it's necessary. And once you go above a certain size tire, the strain you'll be doing on components like power steering rack and ball joints and bushings and drive lines and differentials and all that sort of thing just increases a lot. So if you can sort of see, I'll maybe show a couple extra shots of it. This 4Runner right now has some 80 series Land Cruiser 16-inch wheels mounted on it off of my Hilux build, which have 295 75/16 BF Goodrich KO2 tires on. And I put the 295s on because I was curious to see. By the way, they don't fit these wheels, these 16-inch wheels. You have to take the brake caliper off in the front. So that's what I did to just mock it up and get a feel for the tire size. And then I also, on the passenger side, went ahead and mounted a set of 17-inch Sequoia like limited wheels that have 275, 70, 17 Falcon Wild Peaks on them. And, you know, coming back to the Falcon Wild Peaks, I was curious to see what the size are, and then I had some wheel spacers, chucked them on to get kind of an idea of the offset for a wheel and tire package for this. So we like the 295s. I think that's going to be our minimum size we run. I'm happy with it. My dad's happy with it. Just seeing how it fits in there. It's a nice size tire, and I think it'll work really well without having to cut up a lot of stuff and relocate. And, you know, at the end of the day, want to keep it simple. It's no Land Cruiser, you know, it's no 80 series. It's not built for that, and it can't fit really massive tires without a ton of work. And again, that's where you have to start dumping a ton of money into suspension and, you know, hardened CV axles and it's a whole different world. But anyway, the 295s are great. 80 series wheels have a +0 offset. It's 16/8, so it's given me kind of a feeler for the offset. If you watched episode 1 of this build series and listened to a little bit of my background, I used to work at a wheel company as a videographer. Granted, I was into cars, so I knew a lot more than kind of just your regular video guy and whatnot. But I got to see a lot of various offsets and how they interact with, you know, a fender and a wheel well. And so that has kind of gotten me some great knowledge to throw the spacers on the Sequoia wheels after looking up kind of what the offsets were. And it's actually matching a rough offset of a 17/8.5 -10 wheel, which is very common in the Toyota world. Tacomas fit it, 4Runners fit it. That's a common size for probably somebody running like 285s. So it was just giving me a feeler for the offset. And, you know, not only do I want to fit 295s, I want to make it articulate correctly and fit well. So baseline 295s, and then get rid of the factory 18-inch wheels that came with this 4Runner and go to 17, and maybe try and find a 17/9 wheel, because I'd really like that 9 wide. If not, 8.5 will do. So that's kind of a initial preview on the wheel and tire package. Suspension will kind of work around that. Again, I'm not 100% certain on what kind of budget we have to build this vehicle. You know, that will depend on various other things. So at this time, I can't really give like, oh yeah, we have a set budget and this is what we're going to try and jam in. So you'll see this build sort of evolve over time, and I'll try and provide more updates like this, like a build, like idea or list, or what's happening, what we changed our minds on, that sort of thing. So the suspension is Toy Tech. It can be raised. I think it's like a 1 to 3 inch lift height adjustable coilover. So we'll probably just run that for now and then see what happens later on down the line. I'd like to upgrade to something a little bit different, something that has the shock or the strut tower, the rod or the shaft, whatever you want to call it. It's not very thick. So I'm worried under abuse that might be a kind of a fragile point, and I would not like to have that. So we'll take a look at that later down the line, but it works for now. And because we only want to lift this vehicle 3 inches at most, it might work, you know, to get everything fitted and then find maybe a more suitable suspension for what we're looking for. So that's it on kind of the suspension and like wheel and tire front, at least for like struts and shocks and, you know, that sort of thing. I want to do polyurethane bushings all the way around, body mount bushings to be polyurethane, lower control arm and upper control arm bushings to be polyurethane. I'm going to give a little bit of something away for the suspension episode. We do have SPC upper control arm sitting in a box already for this 4Runner, and you know, they have poly in the upper section, so that is fantastic, and that's going to match everything really, really nicely. So that is my plan. I'd also like to take the steering rack and do poly bushings on that, just kind of firm everything up all the way around and keep it nice and tight. So a worthy mod in my opinion. Expensive, but if we find some deals and stuff, it'll be workable. But yeah, polyurethane bushings kind of all around for everything, as much as I can would be good. And that's really it. Again, for suspension, wheel, and tire, that's it. Bumpers, we would like to do a front bumper at some point, so again, that'll kind of work together with suspension to figure out the right proper spring to support that weight. I'm not sure what bumper. I know Coastal Off-Road makes a bumper and various other businesses provide bumpers for these Toyotas, so I'm not sure what we want to do on that. Our armor for underneath is already covered. There's a man behind the camera giving me a finger right now, which is fantastic. So you'll meet him in episode 3. But armor's already been covered. We have a skid plate for the gas tank, for the front. The control arms have skid plates, so that is definitely staying. If anything, they'll just get cleaned up and reinstalled. So we're good on kind of the undercarriage armor, and the bolt-on sliders from White Knuckle are good as well. So those will be staying. No reason to get rid of them. Pretty happy with how that's already been laid out. A big project would be paint. This vehicle does need paint. I don't know what the cost of that would be. Again, that might be something where I have to see if I have any connections. Somebody that we may know, be able to get us into a booth and they could spray. Somebody that we trust. Paint is a very difficult thing. A lot of people will not spray well. You got shops like Mako that can do, a kind of mediocre job and just kind of slap something on there. But, this is a vehicle we plan on keeping and want to do it right. So it could cost a pretty penny to get it set up well. I personally don't really have any painting experience at all. I did prime my cab for my 79 Toyota pickup or Hilux build, and then I did Raptor coat the whole thing, but that doesn't really count. I don't have real paint experience. So if anything, I have a lot of sanding experience because I sanded that Hilux for what felt like forever, all the way down to the bare metal. But this, you can just go down to the primer and obviously body filler and whatever other little bits of pieces, for body work you got to do. So paint still up in the air, not sure what we're going to do there. Moving on to kind of the rear of the vehicle, we'll kind of loop into suspension and axle briefly. An upgrade I personally would like to do is swap out that 8-inch rear housing for something like an 8.2 from an FJ Cruiser 2010 Plus or a 4Runner from 2010 Plus with an e-locker assembly. I think that would be a great OEM Plus addition to have an e-locker in there. Our 80 series is triple locked from the factory with e-lockers, and it is fantastic. It would be nice to have something OEM Plus in here as well. So those axle housings cost a pretty penny. The cheapest I've seen is like $1,500, ranging from there all the way to $2,500. So maybe it's something we could swap out the rear axle, sell the stock one we have right now because it would be good. Somebody would probably want it, and swap it out for a FJ axle and get that rear locker. Would be really, really sweet. Because you don't have to deal with an ARB air compressor or an air locker. An e-locker would be pretty cool to have. As an OEM Plus thing, everything bolts right up. You don't have to really do any aggressive mods. So that is something I'm also considering. It would be great to have. What else? It's kind of towards the end here. Rear bumper would be also great. I don't know what we would do for that. Again, it's the same deal with the front. As budget allows, we have to figure out the priorities here. So that will kind of remain unknown. Interior. So the interior needs some help. You guys will see a lot of that in the next episode, in episode 3, where we tear apart the entire interior, like I mentioned earlier, not only to deal with the sunroof, but clean and see if we could salvage the carpet, pull everything out and try and do some cleaning. So you guys will see a little bit of that in the future. But the interior doesn't need a whole lot. I'm going to be honest with you. Stock, it's very good. There are certain things that need to be dealt with. And one of those things would be like this Speedo controller box that I kind of pointed out in our initial vehicle inspection. That does need to go. I'm not happy with that in there. During the interior teardown, I got to see how the wires were routed. You'll see a little bit of that again in the next episode. And there was also a traction control button added. I'm not happy with those two things. I'd like to remove them for now and keep the vehicle stock in that form, and then try and find a way to do it better and more correctly versus wiretaps and that sort of thing. So interior, the electrical little aspects need to be taken care of, and we'll do that. I think a good head unit would be a worthy investment, something Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, just for GPS and entertainment for driving this on long drives. That would be great. But again, stereo, that's kind of, you don't have to do that immediately. That can be down the line. So not really a concern right now, but a thought, I guess you could say. We were able to deal with the carpet. You will see that in the next episode. I'm not going to give too much away besides the fact that you should watch it and see how we ended up cleaning it. So we saved some money there that can go towards other mods. But yeah, that was the plan. Get the interior clean. That's where you spend a lot of time, is inside the vehicle. If you're outside, who cares, right? But if you're inside, which you need to be in order to drive and be comfortable, even as a passenger, you want it clean. So we got that sort of taken care of, and you'll see more of that in the future, you know, and that also pertains to the sunroof stuff. So stay tuned for that, what our plan is to deal with the sunroof. I'll let you in on the sunroof a little bit. We want to seal it. I've been in contact with the guy here in Livermore, Coors Customs, Daniel over there. He took care of my floor pans and my Hilux build, and so we want to see if he can seal up that sunroof permanently. It would be very nice to not have a sunroof anymore, so maybe he'll be able to do it, maybe not. We gotta see. Anyway, I don't want to give too much away on that for right now because I don't have a solid answer and I'm trying to get that all sorted out. So, you know, at some point in the future, I'll give a build update, probably as a separate video where we're at, where plans have changed. But that's kind of the idea for this 4Runner. You know, nothing crazy. Make it enjoyable for some touring, you know, fire roads, maybe some more advanced trails, but we're not going to bash rocks on the Rubicon. That's not the goal. You know, if you were to do something like that, you know, you spend a lot of money to go 35s, 37s, you know, there's a lot more involved, but something kind of simple. This is our first IFS build, and I'd like to keep it simple because, you know, changing out CV axles is so much fun on the side of the trail. You can get away with a lot more with small tires and a good lift and a lot of things by, you know, keeping it simple if you know what you're doing. So that's kind of the plan on that. But, you know, eventually maybe a few lights, you know, some paint would be good, restoring the headlights, or maybe even new headlights that are, you know, better matching, cooler looking, DRL, something like that. But really there's not much else to this vehicle. A roof rack would be nice, I guess, but, you know, covering the bases, wheels, tires, good suspension, nice clean interior, and it will be enjoyable. So hopefully that gave you a little insight to what we're thinking about doing with this build. I know this video is probably a little bit long, but I hope you enjoyed the section where we went over just what it would take to get this vehicle up to speed. I know not a lot of people do that, and I figured, you know, it was worthy. And then, you know, if you have suggestions for what we want to or what we should do with this, let us know in the comments. We'll read it. And not only will we read it, we'll research it too. We just like to learn more and kind of see what is possible with this vehicle. I personally don't know a lot about the 4Runners, but I'm learning as I'm reading the forums. I just kind of know general Toyota things, so that is that. So if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, I don't know, comment, do all those things. Follow along if you want to keep seeing what we're going to do to this. And I'm excited to have it progress a little bit and see what this vehicle will come to. So it felt good to talk about some initial build plans today and kind of, you know, throw a feeler out there for what we want to do and then maybe get some feedback from you, the audience. So like I said, if you like it, you know, subscribe, join our journey with this 4th gen 4Runner. You don't want to miss episode 3 of tearing that interior apart. I'll tell you that right now. It's amazing how disgusting vehicles can get. So here's a little teaser coming up for episode 3. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Loudest duel. It's wet.
Yeah, that dog hair really gets everywhere, like you said.
Wow.
Look at that.
That's the fact that it goes all the way in after all this closure.
Rust? Ooh, that's not good.
More than what's already there.
Oh, it's Velcro. Yeah, sunroof was open for a while.
Yeah. Something happening in the back there.
Oh yeah, it was shit back here. This is why it had to come down. You never see this from the roof.
No. This is worse than I thought.
I was saying it made some not nice sounds when I tried it the first time I got into this car.
Definitely worse than I thought.
What's the scale of dirtiness from like 1 to 10? What would you say this is after?
Solid 8+. It's a rundown, hair, spills. It's a mess. It's a mess, but it's all right. It's gonna look good.
Other words were used to describe the interior only a few minutes ago, but no worries.
It's a little f***ed up. But
There's the real answer.
But there's a hope. It's good.